And we welcome you to this edition of Night Shift, following a wild finish there. A little bit of everything as number 7 Cincinnati knocks off UCF 36-33. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Andrew Gluchov. Andrew, we're still catching our breath there. So this is the easiest question I'll ask you all night.
Eric Lopez.
Give me your thoughts on what we just saw.
Well, we saw a pair of really good teams. That's what we saw. As we talked about last week going into the game, I mean, we didn't beat around the bush. Cincinnati is a really good team, and they showed it. You know, you go into a hostile atmosphere. Granted, there was only 11,000 and change in the stands versus a full 44 plus. However, there was still plenty of noise and plenty of energy that they had to fight through. And they earned this win. They played the better game. Statistically, they dominated UCF. The score was closer than the yardage tells you. UCF took advantage of a special teams turnover, but couldn't generate any defensive turnovers on offense, and it came back to bite them. Kudos to the Bearcats. This has been their year.
Yeah, it's been a good year, but boy, they almost let that go at the end there. They kind of milked the clock. They didn't go in for the touchdown. Ritter stayed at the 1, and I actually thought it was well executed up until that last fourth down play where the snap was so bad that if UCF scoops that up, they got a chance to win the game in the most craziest of finish. So they got cute there, and it almost backfired on them for Coach Fickle and company there at the end. What did you think of that sequence?
Well, I mean, at that point, I would have done a direct snap, but under center. But that's just me. I mean, the chance of an errant snap like that is pretty remote. But I mean, that's what happened, and it nearly came back to bite Cincinnati in the butt. But it left 1 second on the clock. They needed a miracle. They did not get one.
Well, UCF got off to a good start. They led 14-3 early, but I tell you what. Desmond Ritter, to me, was fantastic. And I know this won't be a popular opinion here, Andrew, but I think Desmond Ritter right now is the American Conference Player of the Year. Because, some people are going to mention Gabriel's stats, and Gabriel's had a great year. But to me, Desmond Ritter was unbelievable. I thought UCF's defensive game plan was they're going to shut down the run. We're going to make Ritter beat us on the passing game. And he did. He threw over 200 yards in the first half and made some big plays. And then at the end of the game, every time a play needed to be made, Ritter made it either with his arm or his legs. I mean, he got away there to get that first down that was a killer in that last drive. I was so impressed with this kid. Amazing how much growth he's had, and kudos to him. I thought he was fantastic.
Oh, Ritter had an outstanding game, and UCF's game plan was solid. Make him win in the air, and he did. Throwing for 338 yards, 2 touchdowns. He definitely outplayed Dylan Gabriel. Had more time in the pocket to be able to make those decisions. Had a quicker release for the majority of the game, and as a result, was able to generate yards, move the ball. When you look at the numbers, Cincinnati played more of a UCF style offense than UCF did, and it all came back to line play. And that's another thing that I highlighted in the roundtable was that the battle was going to be won in the trenches. And UCF's defensive line had spurts where they created a lot of disruption and tackles for loss. And they ultimately had more tackles for loss than Cincinnati did, 7-6. But Cincinnati's intensity on the defensive line was constant. It never stopped. And it caused UCF to have to get out of their normal state of mind offensively. Dylan Gabriel switched to a more West Coast style with shorter, quicker outs, 3-step drops, and a much faster offense as far as post-snap. But they really couldn't get any consistency going drive to drive, whereas Cincinnati just never really lost it. Even when they had drives stall, they never really lost it. And I don't call that a coaching issue. I just think that was just a talent issue. Say what you want. Cincinnati is the best team in the American.
Might be the best team ever in the American, depending on how they finish the season here. If they win out, who knows? We're looking at the stats here. There was a stat in particular that I kind of promoted a lot, Andrew, on the podcast this past week on the Banneret. on our article previewing the game on Roundtable, and I even was on the Sons of UCF pregame. Shout out to our friends there, Andrew and Mike and Trace, for having me on. I appreciate it very much. And the stat I kept talking about, and we even talked about this last week, Andrew, average yards per play. UCF coming into this game was averaging 7.2 yards per play, among the best in the country. I think they were top 15. Cincinnati defensively averaging, giving up just 4.4 yards per play. That was top 10 in the country. And I felt this game in a lot of ways would be told, the story would be told based on whichever team can get closer to that average. And if you look at the stats, UCF averaged 4.3 yards per play, by far their worst of the season. In fact, that is their second worst yards per play average in a game in the Josh Heupel era, only trailing the Fiesta Bowl loss to LSU, where they had a 4.1. They actually did worse today, Andrew. This might surprise people. They did worse yards per play than they did last year at Cincinnati when they averaged 4.4 yards per play. So what it tells you is nothing was easy. UCF had to earn everything they got on offense, and the defense didn't give up anything chippies. I thought UCF did pretty good on the red zone, but there was no freebies. UCF, this offense really lives off those 30, 40, 50-yard chunk plays, right? Big plays. And we didn't see that. Cincinnati made them go the entire field. Even when UCF scored, they had to go 10, 12 plays just to score. And Cincinnati defensively, I thought, did a heck of a job there. Plus, on the other side of the ball, Cincinnati averaged 6 yards per play. And even and you look at it, they had 144 yards rushing. 137 of that came in the second half. Incredible running offense. And look at the quarterbacks. Desmond Ridder, 21 of 32, 338 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran for 57 and scored 2 more. Dylan Gabriel, 26 of 49 for 243, 3 touchdowns, and that costly pick in the fourth quarter. What'd you make of that fourth quarter interception there? A lot of people thought that was a drop by Martin over there in the middle. Maybe it was. Maybe the throw was a little behind it, but that happens when the defense is on the UCF offensive skill players. Cincinnati tackled really well, and when you put pressure on that, when you're tackling well, and you're on constantly on the skill positions faces, you're going to create some havoc, and that's what Cincinnati did there. They made UCF earn for that, and I thought that was a big part of this game.
Well, to answer your question, it was both. Throw was a little behind, but it wasn't enough behind that a capable receiver like Marlon Williams can't make that. There was a number of bobbled passes and drops, similar to what happened last week that continued on. And against a good team as opposed to Temple, they capitalized on it. And that interception was really the big deflator of the game. UCF had a small lead at that point. They had the ball. They had a chance to pull away, and gave a very short field to Cincinnati. And as a result, a touchdown, they lost the lead, and they never got it back.
Yeah, no question about it. What did you what else jumped out to you about this game? I thought the trenches I thought were big. Cincinnati, when they needed to get the short yardage, they did. UCF couldn't run the football. They averaged only about 3 yards a pop. I thought Cincinnati really did a good job, and UCF just wasn't efficient offensively.
I mean, the UCF offensive line just couldn't do really anything, and that was more of a tribute to Cincinnati than a dig on UCF. I mean, Cincinnati's defensive line was that good, and it's been talked about nationwide going, before this game ever took place, of how good that defense is and that defensive line. The truth was, they rendered Greg McCray, a great running back, irrelevant. I mean, he was truly irrelevant. 7 carries, 19 yards, and a 3-yard reception. That was it. I mean, they took him out of the game plan. And Otis Anderson was really the guy for most of it, and he had to fight for yards. 12 carries, 51 yards. I mean, these are not traditional numbers you see out of this UCF offense, and that's a tribute to the defense that the Bearcats have, which Luke Fickell, being a defensive guy to begin with, man, has he put a good product together. And after the embarrassment that happened to them 2 years ago, the last time they were in Orlando, you knew that the players that were there then had something to prove now. And they did, especially Desmond Ridder, because, I mean, he was just absolutely schooled 2 years ago and did the schooling this time. He pretty much played mistake-free football outside of that one errant snap on that fourth down at the end of the game.
You mentioned the running game, 35 carries for 116 yards for UCF there. McCray, 7 carries, 19 yards. Dylan Gabriel, 11 carries for 30 yards. Boy, he ran more. Some of that was on, was ad lib. But what'd you think of the running distributions there? Thompson, 5 carries, 16 yards. Anderson, 12 for 51. But you mentioned it. Cincinnati, 3.3 yards per carry allowed. Cincinnati, on the other hand, had 48 carries for 144 yards. They only averaged 3 yards a carry, so I didn't think UCF defensively against the run was that bad, especially in the first half, but they just got worn down. And again, okay, Andrew, when you run a fast offense like UCF does, you're not converting, you're not staying on the field. Cincinnati ends up with a plus 15 in the time of possession. That's going to wear down any defense. And they got some pressure there on Dylan there at the end there. And tough one to swallow for UCF. It's the tough one. It's a what ifs. The interception, obviously costly, converted to touchdown, but it's boy, who would have thought Cincinnati would outgain UCF 482 to 359?
Well,
that's impressive.
That just shows that Cincinnati's ball won because their style, remained true. UCF was held to a Cincinnati-like number. However, unlike prior teams that Cincinnati's played against, UCF scored more than 20 points. In fact, they scored more than 30 points. However, the final score, doesn't care that 33 points were given up because 36 were scored altogether for the Bearcats. So, I give UCF a lot of credit. They scrapped, those Dylan Gabriel runs. Those were coverage runs. That's him tucking and running because he had no choice. The downfield was taken over. The defensive backs just played a really solid game. I mean, they had a lot of good plays on defense and caused enough disruption that players like Jalen Robinson, who normally have good hands in the deep third, weren't making plays. They couldn't see the ball. They were shielded. And in college, you can get away with that. It's allowed. In the pros, you got to make a play on the ball. When it comes down to it, it's a team game, and the team did not rise up to the occasion.
Feel free, by the way, to jump in with comments here on our YouTube section. You can send questions. I got some questions are starting to drop in here. I think I was worried for a second. Maybe people were just going to be too depressed to ask questions, but they're coming now. So I'm excited about that. And of course, make sure you subscribe to us on our YouTube page. Give us a nice recommendation too there. Give us a nice thumbs up there when you see there on the YouTube page. So that helps us out. We're going to do more YouTube videos throughout the season. This, we're going to do post games as well on the football, on basketball once that gets going. Let me ask, all right, Michael Rukowski, one of the loyal listeners and certainly reads our stuff at blackandgoldbanneret.com. I hope they just cancel the game against the Cows.
No. If they don't win by at least 3 touchdowns in that game, let's be honest. Yeah, UCF lost this game against a top 10 team in the country. They're going to steamroll the Cows. Okay, let's be honest. It's not even going to be close. I mean, come on.
Well, if they play. Now, there's COVID issues. There is COVID issues to think about. South Florida's had some COVID issues, so we'll see about that. We're going to be monitoring that in the coming days, but that is a rivalry game. That's what I'm told. There's a trophy on the line. You got to,
There's a trophy. There's a trophy on the line. USF is a terrible team. You think ECU is bad? Wait till you see these guys, and take all the aggression and frustration of 3 very close, coin flip games, and just take it out on those guys out west. Have a good time with it.
Other questions. Trace, our buddy, speaking of which, who's a part of the Sons of UCF pregame, joining us here, he says, did Cincinnati do anything that was a surprise? UCF, not good enough. Going to Olo Leary there. NGE, not good enough in this one. That's from Trace. There to you, Andrew. That's the question to you. Feels good to say Trace questions to Andrew. I feel like I've heard that before. What's your response to Trace on that?
Well, the truth is UCF's game plan was to have Ritter win in the air, and he did. He outplayed Dylan Gabriel, throwing for well over 300 yards. As far as anything surprising, no. We've seen, well, anyone who's really followed Cincinnati has seen the development of Desmond Ridder from 2 years ago to last year to this year. And how he did is no surprise. I mean, he's got great pocket awareness, knows when to tuck and run, has great talent with his feet. His arm is way more accurate than it used to be. And yeah, if you look at the stats for the year, he doesn't light it up, but it's because he doesn't have to. And this time he had to, and he did. I give credit, for a good game plan, because this was the correct game plan for UCF, is make him win in the air because that's where he's weaker. But it just shows how good Desmond Ridder is by the fact that he took that challenge and dominated it. But I don't think there was anything that was a real surprise. No.
Cost Seg advisor, a good friend, chiming in. Drops mean don't stay on the field on third down. Some drops there. Your response to that?
Oh yeah. As I said before, there was issues that carried over from last week's game. There were drops. Some of them were flat out drops. Some of them were a result of good defense. Like I alluded to, that one deep pass to Jalen Robinson late in the game where it went through his arms. Part of the problem was he lost sight of the ball because the defender did that great of a job of blocking his view. So he couldn't get his arms in quick enough. That it may look like a drop pass, but that's a defensive caused drop. That's just a tribute to how good those defensive backs are. But he's absolutely right. There were unnecessary drops that there's no excuse for. I've always been in the idea of, if it's in your hand, you can catch it, and that didn't happen, especially with the Marlon Williams bobble that became an interception. It was in his hands. He couldn't pull it in, and it became an easy pick. And it caused that, potentially, you could say, was what caused UCF to lose the game.
Yeah. Penalties, that's been brought up here as well in the chat room there. Penalties, not as many penalties, obviously, as the Tulsa game and things like that, but there were a couple of costly penalties there that hurt UCF in certain sequences in this game there. That you're still kind of like, I mean, I didn't think the penalties was as big of a fact. In fact, Cincinnati was the team that committed a lot of penalties in this game, doubled them. Yeah,
look, the number speaks for themselves. UCF 5 for 65. Were they in some bad situation? Yeah, I mean, a unnecessary 15-yarder pulling a player off the pile. That's just really, what are you thinking? It was a stupid penalty, but they really didn't have all that many penalties. Cincinnati kept UCF in the game with that big pass interference on fourth down that led to the final touchdown that kept the Knights in the game. But I mean, overall, penalties really weren't a thing in this game. I mean, 5 penalties, that's actually very manageable. It was only 65 yards in penalty yards. I'll take that every time.
Yeah, I agree, which is kind of funny that we're saying that for sure. Let's go to the tweets here. Brian Murphy, who will hopefully will join us later, is right now at the post game, and you see right there, I'm showing Brian Murphy. Make sure you follow him. He's a great follow. Pre-game, post game. He just quoting there. Josh Heupel praised his team for his competitiveness, energy, and spirit. Said they are all disappointed, but repeatedly mentions how his team has improved throughout the year. We were just not on the right side of it. That's going to get some that comment there, that quote from Josh saying that they're a better team now. Are you buying that? Because I don't know if some of the fan base will buy that necessarily.
Well, they're certainly a better team now than they were at the Tulsa and Memphis games. That's for sure. Yeah, this was a loss, but don't discount the fact that this was a loss against one of the top teams in the country. And the fact it became a coin flip of a game. It was really 1 or 2 plays that made the difference in this one. That helped Cincinnati, win. But I don't look at this as a huge negative so much as the Tulsa and Memphis losses. I mean, as we've seen, Tulsa's this weird destined for greatness team that seems to pull victory out of the jaws of defeat in ways that are just truly uncanny. The Memphis game was a bad loss. They were not nearly as good of a team as UCF, while a good team, UCF was a better team and really just fell apart defensively and allowed Memphis to climb back in and win that game. This wasn't a bad loss. This was, I don't know how else I can spin that. This was not a bad loss. This is definitely not a sky is falling. The season is over. Loss. Sure, the American Athletic Conference championship game is not in the picture anymore. It's done. Move on. There's, as Josh Heupel said in one of Brian Murphy's quotes, burn this one. It's a quick turnaround. We got a trophy game. Our guys will be ready to play. We've got a trophy game. That's a big game. It's not a game you never want to lose a trophy to the other guys. Obviously, the rivalry is big enough that it's worthy of a trophy. UConn game notwithstanding. But, there's, unless something changes, there's also a bowl game in the horizon. And we don't know what the future holds. But until something changes, we can say that there's a bowl game in the horizon. So there's still, realistically 2 more games left this season. These young men don't deserve abandonment. They've played hard. They've worked hard. There's been some unfortunate circumstances between injuries, opt-outs, team policy issues and legal issues that have really marred this season. But don't take it away from the players who've done it the right way, who are sticking it out and playing hard and all this other stuff. Let them finish with the love and support that they've received all year. Don't abandon them. The season is not over.
It's not over, but there's going to be questions. And one of the questions, here's an interesting tweet here as I'm going to get it up here. Chris Vanini from The Athletic, who does a great job covering college football in the Group of Five, if you will. You've had him on the podcast. Right there tweeting, Josh Heupel is now 27-7 at UCF. All 7 losses have been by 1 score. 5-3 this year, but UCF blew a double-digit lead in all 3 losses. This is a narrative that is continuing here, Andrew. Close losses, 1-score games. Can you win a close game? That is still going to hover with this program moving forward to 2021 until they win a close game right now. That's a monkey on the back, fairly or not.
Well, it is, but in some ways it's a little unfair. 14-3 early, yeah, it's a double-digit lead, but it was first quarter. It still counts, but it was first quarter. There was 3 quarters of game left to play. A lot can change. And we've seen on the flip side where UCF has come back from big deficits. 1-score game, it's all about the lucky bounce. Some games work out, some games don't. You go back to that 25-game win streak. There were a couple games that one bounce the other way, UCF loses. That's how these games are. And he had, Heupel's had lucky breaks. He's had unlucky breaks. This team's too good to get blown out, and there have been no blowout losses. And while the critics are gonna hammer on the fact that they're all 1-score losses, we should also look at the fact that they've never been run off the field, and they've never truly embarrassed themselves in a game that they should at least be competitive.
Well, the defense has improved, and I think part of the reason is I think they got better players on the field. Let's talk about Tatum Bethune, please. The kid was unbelievable. Him and Richie Grant were studs on the field. They were all over the field, and I know you've talked about Bethune on your article on the knee-jerk reaction to postgame. You've been high on him. I thought he's been fantastic the last 3 games, and quite honestly, I tweeted out during the game, I wish he played more earlier, because I think the guys that have stepped up since the departure of the guys that got kicked off the team, they've been an upgrade on this team defensively.
Well, with Bethune, is young and needed seasoning. Earlier in the season, I don't think he would have had nearly as much success as he does now. Eric Mitchell playing as a senior, he was, they looked for him for leadership more than anything else. Was he the best linebacker on the team? No. But, he was a vocal senior and took it from a leadership standpoint, which you can't really replicate without experience. And Bethune didn't have it. So he stepped in. He obviously has a much higher ceiling than Eric Mitchell did. And UCF is benefiting from it. Now, he still needs work, but this is a great opportunity to learn it. I always chalked 2020 as a bit of a wash, not because of all the cancellations and postponements, but just because the normal is gone. And with the fact that all these players have an extra year of eligibility, this becomes a learning session for the younger players. Most of these guys are not going pro after their junior year. Let's be honest. It's not happening. So players like Bethune, like Jean-Baptiste, and Morris Brash, these defenders, Corey Thornton, these young players coming in, Derek Gaines, that are coming in and getting a lot of experience. This will really benefit them for 2021. Yes, there's going to be losses in 2021 on both sides of the ball. I wouldn't be surprised if Richie Grant moves on. I wouldn't be surprised if Marlon Williams moves on. Greg McCrae. These are guys. They could they stay another year? Sure. Do I think they're going to? I don't.
Yeah, Marlon Williams is going to get paid, man. That kid,
he's going to get paid.
He's a stud. He was a stud again. He has been amazing. And one thing that kind of got under, maybe let's not forget, he missed a good chunk of that fourth quarter. I don't know if he was banged up. I don't know what was going on. Obviously, it had to be something because he wasn't on the field as much in the fourth quarter there. But yeah, he was incredible. Remember that drive in that third quarter? He set the tone, made some Bearcat defenders miss, scored the touchdown with his physicality, scored the 2-point play with his will. Man, that kid's unbelievable. I think he's having the greatest season any whiteout has had in UCF football history.
Oh, he's had an outstanding year, and if he had a full season, he'd be shattering records left and right. He may still break some records, but obviously it's going to be a lot more difficult with less games. Still has 2 more to do it. Now, what's interesting is the fact that no UCF wide receiver broke 100 yards. In fact, if you actually look at the box score, no one broke 100 yards in anything. There were no 100-yard rushers. There were no 100-yard receivers on either team. There was a lot of distribution of the ball, and no one really took over. Outside of the quarterback play, which you're going to get a lot of yards. No one really dominated on those other skill positions. So they had hard fought games. Marlon Williams and Garrett Dokes each ended up with 97 yards, just shy. But the record books don't care that you didn't quite make it. The flat out rule is that you didn't make it.
Oh, you bring up an interesting point, Andrew. Williams got his 8 for 97, but look at the rest of the crew. Robinson 5 for 32. I know he caught the touchdown, but that's they shut him down. Trey Nixon, welcome back. 5 for 24. O'Keefe, 3 for 9. Jacob Harris had the one big catch there that was 41 yards, but they did a good job of containing everybody else other than Marlon Williams did Cincinnati's defense, I thought. And, I want to ask you about that at the end of the first half where Gabriel throws the fade for O'Keefe. What did you think about that? Because they had 2 timeouts at the time. I thought, hey, keep dinking it. Get closer here. Maybe you can get a score. At worst, you kick a field goal. They went with the fade. It nearly got intercepted, and they had to settle for the field goal. What was your thoughts on that sequence right before the half?
Well, I mean, he underthrew it. That's what it came down to. The problem with those is with fade routes is you have a very small window of opportunity. If you don't hit the right spot, you got a good chance of an interception. And Gabriel, he was efficient at the time. He was still riding his interception-less streak, which did end. And I'd like to point out between you and me, Eric, before ESPN showed the graphics about Gabriel's streak ending, I already had it as a note on my article about it because I was following it based on the team record books going into the game.
Very good. Very well played on that. Let's get back to some of the comments here now. Trace, disagreeing with you a little bit here, commenting, saying back-to-back 3-loss seasons at a minimum, is the program regressing? That's going to be a question that's probably going to be a hot topic on sports talk radio and podcasts this week, I have a feeling.
Well, I mean, I'll ultimately kick it back to you for your take on this, but I wouldn't say regressing. I think it's also a fact that the conference is progressing. The American is a conference on the rise, and you can't win them all. But I don't want to see UCF pull a Frank Solich and fire a coach who was coming off a 10-win season. And look at Nebraska now. They had a couple flash in the pan seasons with Bo Pelini and a lot of cow dung out there. UCF needs to be smart. They can't afford to fire Josh Heupel right now. That's going to be $2.25 million after the bowl games. Also, they don't want to create a perception issue. You're firing a coach that's 26-7. And we'll assume like the season ended today. That's 26-7. that would make other coaches a little bit nervous. I'm from Cleveland. I know how coaches felt after the Browns fired, a coach after 1 year, Rod Chazinski, after one season, and it caused all sorts of problems. And no one wanted the Cleveland job after that because they felt that there was no job security. I think that would have a negative impact on UCF to fire and replace a coach with such a high winning percentage.
I don't think people are saying that he should be fired or anything like that. I think people are questioning, is there some things that has to be addressed within the team or the program, if you will, to get back? Because the goal for this team every year is to win the conference championship. I don't like the playoff talk because that's out of your control. But this team was the favorites to win the league, and a lot of people thought they had a pretty favorable schedule. And they were a trendy pick as far as, hey, this is prior to the Big Ten coming back, that they could be the party crasher when it comes to the playoffs. So there was high expectations with this team. So it's not like, man, so I think some people are wondering, what is there things there that you see or that needs to be addressed that could help this team get over the hump and be back to being the conference champions in the American?
Well, part of the hump is the fact they lost key players at key positions before the season ever started. That didn't help at all, especially on defense. And defense has been where the question marks have been all season. You're playing true freshmen on a team that's supposed to win the conference. That's not normal. But this season is not normal. All bets are off. The fact that UCF lost multiple starters and guys on the two deep before the season ever started because of COVID opt-outs. And say what you want, 10 players is a lot of players to lose to the opt-outs. And from what I understand, a lot of talking heads viewed that as the season started as a red flag. And it turned out they were right. Granted, it took a little while for it to really flare up. But they were right. It was a red flag. And I don't blame UCF. I don't blame the coaching staff. I don't blame anyone for that. That's circumstantial. That goes beyond our control. People want to, they have to take care of their families. They have to do what's best for themselves. You can't really hate on anyone for choosing to opt out for their own safety or their family's safety. You have to play with the cards you're dealt. And UCF had a bit of a depth problem that got exposed. And this season has been used going forward as ability to clean up that depth problem so it's not an issue next year, because now these players that we're going to have to step in have a lot of game experience. As I said, I view 2020 as a bit of a wash, and it's partly because of that. Do I think it's a regression? I think regression is a little strong of a term. I think it was a little bit of an exposing of a top-heavy starting lineup and a thin depth chart. And you know what? This is the best way to fix it, is to kind of take your lumps here, take your loss at Memphis, which was, in my opinion, strictly because of that lack of depth and experience. Take it, move on. And 2021 is going to be the big year because there are no excuses for 2021.
Well, Jim John, who we appreciate tuning in, has I want to add, he said coaching staff never has a plan B. He also commented, where do we need to get better? Your reaction to Jim John's thoughts there?
Well, the offensive line is by far the weakest part of this team, by far. And they've struggled with a combination of injuries and lack of experience. And you had a redshirt freshman coming in as your starting center. Center, as we've talked about before, is the hardest line position out there by far. And he struggled for a while. He's kind of settled in a little bit, but he's still, the team as a unit, is still struggling. And I disagree a bit on the don't have a plan B. We saw plan B. Plan B turned UCF into a West Coast offense. There was three-step dropbacks by Dylan Gabriel. The entire first drive of the second half was based on three-step dropbacks. And he was moving the ball very quick. Problem was they just couldn't get a rhythm because the rest of the defense was just that good. If UCF's offensive line was able to settle down and buy a little more time, I think we'd be having a very different discussion tonight.
Other comments, Kostek advisor agrees with you in that the penalties no real impact on the game, and that this defense would have beaten Memphis. Do you buy that the way the defense is playing now, you think they would have held on and beaten Memphis?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's tricky, right? Because it's bad. How do it's apples and oranges.
Absolutely. And I would take it a step further. If the defense played tonight like they or played like they did tonight, they probably would have beaten Tulsa too. While the offense stalled, they would have kept a Tulsa offense that does not have as much star power as Cincinnati in check. But absolutely, I think if UCF's defense played this way the rest of the season beforehand, they wouldn't have had any other losses except this game.
I don't know if I agree with the Tulsa thing. The way they're pulling out victories, something they got some things going beyond on the field there. They won with a third-string quarterback last night. I don't even know what night we're in anymore.
Well,
But winning that game against Tulane on Thursday night. They've won, with East Carolina, and they fumbled, but the refs called them down. I mean, they've had some interesting fortune that some would say destined.
Has there been a team this year any more snake bitten than Tulane? I mean, really?
Yeah, they've blown three. They talk about teams that they've blown three big leads, double digits too. They blew a big lead against a Navy. They blew a lead against Houston, and now that one. So they could have been easily a big year. So they are not closing games out either over there. Eric Edwards posting, all I want for Christmas is KZ to play at least a quarter versus the Cows. I don't see that happening. Playing a quarter.
I don't know about a quarter. I really do. I think he may get some garbage time? Sure. I mean, he's, as far as I know, they're gonna suit him up. But I mean, we won't know until they actually do it. And don't be surprised if they do like some voodoo replacements thing where he suits up for the second half. I think they have to declare their active and inactive players going in. But I think if he does play, it's going to be garbage time. I don't think he's going to play a meaningful snap again at UCF. This is Dylan Gabriel's team, but USF's that bad of a team that it wouldn't surprise me if he finds a way on the field to do some garbage time.
Deontay Reed chiming in. Great, got new listeners here and people tuning in here. Cincy game came out with an 8-minute drive to start the second half and set the tone to where the defense couldn't get off the field. They were the better team. That was a great drive. Now, UCF did a great job. Bethune did a good job there for, making the play on Ritter to held him to a field goal. But that set the tone. You knew at that point that Cincinnati had, pushed the envelope in the halftime and said, yeah, we're going to be more physical at the trenches than they were.
Oh, yeah. Well, Garrett Dokes is a human wrecking ball. I mean, he actually hurt Derek Gaines on a play, when he scored that touchdown. He just barreled right through him. And the guy was a wrecking ball. What was he, about 230 pounds or so? I mean, that guy's solid. And that's how you wear defenses down, is by taking a guy like Dokes and just keep running him. And they ran him a lot. He had more carries than anyone else on the field, and it wasn't even close. So, they had an excellent game plan to counteract UCF's, hey, win it in the air, Ritter, which he did. But 28 carries is a lot for a single running back. And they ran the ball 48 times, and that, especially in the second half, where they were just pounding it down UCF's throat to the point where that defensive line just couldn't do anything. So, I mean, kudos to them.
Got more comments here. Eric Edwards, kicking game. Now, Urbanski, I think they're alluding there. A couple of kickoffs went out of bounds, and one in particular in that fourth quarter that set up Cincinnati there on that drive there kind of hurt them from a field position situation.
Well, it was weird. It actually was. It's happened what 3 times in the entire game of kicking out of bounds. Between both teams. I mean, it was apparently, I guess, not a good day for kicking altogether. But I totally agree. Normally Obarski has a cannon of a leg and is able to boot those kickoffs really well. But I mean, things were just pulling over to the left side of the kick, and I guess they just weren't compensating for enough because it happened multiple times for both teams. But you're right, that played a big role because that's 10 yards right there. Instead of 25, you're looking at 35.
It's ironic, too, because Cincinnati was the team that was self-destructing on special teams early in the game with the muff punt that set up UCF's second score of the game. And they nearly had a second muff punt that luckily they recovered. Otherwise, we could be talking about a different game here as well. So they had some issues, too, on the special teams. And I don't know if either side was thrilled with their special teams. Put it that way.
No, I mean, there was nothing redeeming on the special teams at all here. Even Andrew Osteen, who's normally really consistent, I mean, he had one horrible punt that couldn't even cross midfield, and that didn't bode well either. So I wasn't on the field. I couldn't feel the wind, but I guess it did play a role because it was pulling the ball, this way and that for those kicking and punting units.
Deontay Ed Reed's chiming in. Too many missed opportunities on both sides of the ball. But, man, the defense always disappoints. Cincy gives up 12 points a game, and we scored 33 on them. Got to find a way to win that game.
Well, to hammer it down, they hadn't given up more than 20. And the fact that UCF's offense, was able to put 33 on them just shows you how good UCF's offense is. Cincinnati bent. They didn't break. And, in fact, I think this game actually puts Cincinnati over 100 points given up all season. Coming into this, I believe they were at 70 all season given up. I mean, that's ridiculous. As far as, that scoring efficiency on the defensive side of the ball. Well, let's be honest. There were some missed opportunities, but let's not discount these Bearcats. They're that good. I mean, they deserve inclusion in CFP talks at this point. UCF's not a pushover team. Don't let the lack of voting in polls tell you otherwise. This is a very good Knights team that just had a couple of unfortunate bounces. I hang my hat on the Bearcats. I thought they played a beautiful, excellent executed game, and deserve to be complimented for the product they put out.
Well, and a good poise too. They were down 14-3. They didn't panic. They were a lot of teams panic in that situation. They did not. They were very poised on that. Trace chiming in, not advocating to fire hype. 2013 led to more losses in 2014 and over in 2015. Are we accepting 2 to 3 or more losses a season is the standard?
Well, I mean, you want always to run the table, but I mean, how often do teams run the table? I mean, it's not often. You're going to have seasons with a few losses, because as we've seen here, we've seen it last year, we've seen it 2 years ago, and even in the 2016 year, we can go all the way back there. There was a number of games that were just one bounce away, one way or the other, from being very different. Heck, I mean, 2015, there was a couple of games that were single play games early in the season before the wheels fell off, that really dictated that season. I mean, football's a game of inches, and it couldn't be more true than what we've seen with Heupel in these close losses. The expectation should always be, strive for perfection, but I mean, settle on excellence. And the truth is, perfection is so hard to attain that it's not reasonable to view a season as a failure if you don't get it.
Cost advisor said 60% defense would play. Year 1 or year 2. That's a good point on this team here, and I think that's I really like Tatum Bethune. I like Cam Good. I think you're starting to see some guys grow up. In fact, I do like this group of guys better than the guys that were prior to Houston. And you can read into that whatever you want to read into that. But I like these group. I wish I would have seen more of these guys earlier. And I think finally one of the thick questions I had before the season, Andrew, was, are there going to be guys on this defense that teams have to game plan for? And we're starting to see now some guys develop that, hey, next year you're going to have to game plan for some of these guys.
Well, I think the big difference between this group and the group that they've replaced was spirit. I mean, these guys have played some spirited games. I love it. They're out for blood. They're
hungry. They're hungry, right?
It's encouraging. I mean, and they're not taking the opportunity for granted. It could have been easily, a very dour atmosphere coming into it, taking over for suspended and eventually dismissed players and just go through the motions. But no, they're looking at it as a real life audition to solidify that spot for themselves going forward. and not only just solidify the spot, but to excel in it. And you have to be encouraged. Cam Good, Morris Brash, Bethune. I mean, these guys are really embracing the opportunity that was given to them, and they're not taking it for granted.
Well said. I agree 100% with that. Eric Edwards chiming in. The things I blame hype for is play calling and the lack of discipline. Too many stupid penalties that show lack of discipline. O-line penalties were cleaned up. We talked about that earlier, about the penalties. I don't think that was a big factor here in this game against Cincinnati. Yes, there was a couple that you kind of shake your head. But the play calling, he brings up play calling. Any issues with Heupel's play calling?
Well, he had to change his play calling scheme altogether. Cincinnati's defense just didn't allow it. Normally they use a longer pocket to be able to set up those deep plays. They didn't have it, which really, really hampers his ability to do his game plan. Now, what I will, give a negative on with Heupel is the fact they should have known this was coming. Cincinnati's defensive line is just that good. They should have already had a more quick strike game plan in place so that it didn't take until the first drive in the second half to actually implement it.
Comments coming in, baby, at a record pace. I love it. We're going to be, by the way, sticking around. We're hoping to get Brian Murphy before we sign off. He's busy in the post game. No guarantees, but we're going to try to wait it out to see if we could get Murph for his thoughts from the stadium. But obviously, post game usually has no surprise, and a game like this tends to run a little long. Deontay Reed writes, I look at this as a throwaway year anyway, due to COVID, young players getting good experience for next year. Fans got to realize we aren't always going to be the best team on the field, and we're not going to go undefeated every year. I think exactly. I agree with that. Cincinnati was the better team.
They were.
This year. They were the better game. I don't think this is a loss that you lose sleep over in the offseason. I think the losses that are going to bother you more is the second half of the Tulsa game and the second half of the Memphis game. Would you agree? I think those two losses in particular, maybe even the Memphis loss more than the Tulsa, because Tulsa's turned out to be pretty good and having a magical year. That's the one that I think is going to haunt you a little bit more than the Cincinnati loss, because think of it this way. If you win, if you hold on and beat Tulsa and Memphis, you're still in the title picture.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. I think the Tulsa loss is less of a bad loss than Memphis. Tulsa was a good defense already coming in, and they just tightened up and took care of business. The Memphis game was the wheels just falling off, and you saw it on the sideline. The wheels fell off on that game, and there's no justifiable excuse on that one. That's the one you lose sleep over, because that's the one that got away. Tulsa, and you're right, and they're I don't know if they signed a deal with Satan or something, but they're pulling some strange wins out of thin air. And how that Tulane game ended was just absolutely ridiculous. And I go into work the next day, and my coworker asked me if I watched, the Seattle Arizona game. I said no, I watched the Tulsa Tulane game. And they go, well, why'd you do that? I go, because it was the greatest ending ever. And I had to explain what happened. They had no idea. I mean, it was, college, just random college game that had no score at halftime, looked like to be a complete snooze fest, turned out to be the game of the week. I mean, this was ridiculous at how this one ended. But you're right. Perfection is not we want it. It's not reasonable to attain it every year. Like I've said, 2020, I view it as a growing year, as a wash year. There were circumstances outside the school's control, outside the players' control, that you couldn't take and you couldn't do with. Heck, UCF lost one of their tune-up games early in the season to COVID restrictions by FIU before the season ever started. So I mean, it's not like UCF didn't get hit by the COVID bug. They're just lucky that players haven't come down with it, and it hasn't run rampant through the program like other schools have had. But I agree with that post about aim for 2021. 2020's it's a bit of a wash, and I wanted something great out of it, but I'm not losing sleep over this one.
Edwards chiming in, that unsportsmanlike conduct for the late hit on the quarter on Ritter that gave them a second chance in that turn he thought turned the game around. Do you buy that? Remember that hit early in that game? I don't know about. I mean, I remember the play because I had a friend text me about bringing back memories of the Fiesta Bowl where they had the penalty on Joe Burrow when it was 14-3, the celebration there, and it turned the game around. I'm not going to go that far on this one, but I do recall that penalty. That was a momentum a little bit. What'd you think of that?
Well, that hit on Burrow was legal. I mean, it was brutal, but it was clean. It was a clean hit. It's just, well, you knocked a few screws in the process. I mean, do I think it was the big change? No, I don't. I think some of the dumber penalties were like the penalty after the hard hit on Gabriel as he was heading out of bounds. It was a clean hit, and I know players got upset over it, but UCF got a penalty for that late in the first half. I think that was the big one because it really hurt UCF's opportunity to move the ball downfield to try and score, and ultimately had to settle on a field goal instead. The other one was the pulling the player off the pile. I just scratch my head right now because I don't know what possesses someone to think that that's a good idea. No, let the refs handle it all. Don't cause trouble. Get your head down. Do what you're supposed to do. Those were the really stupid penalties that I think really turned the tide of the game.
We got a special guest, Andrew. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, there he is.
It's the Murph.
Live, Brian Murphy there from his vehicle. I know that vehicle very well. Yes. Murph, how you doing? Have you caught your breath there? That was that game was interesting. Had a lot of interesting subplots there.
That game was weird. That game was very weird and odd. Like, yeah, I think. Look, I do think the better team won. I think Cincinnati's defense is totally legit, and they kind of proved it. But the penalties, the drops that are so rare, but so many drops on both teams. We had a power outage. It was it was a very weird game. Very weird game.
What was the post game like? I know you, Coach Heupel spoke, and Richie Grant spoke, among others. Give us thoughts of what everybody was saying in the post game.
Pretty sullen, pretty downtrodden, not saying a whole lot. Josh Heupel wanted to kind of strike an upbeat note, and really before while we were talking about the loss, he really wanted to sort of change the conversation to how much this team has improved throughout the course of the year, and said he really liked his spirit, the team's energy, the team's competitiveness, the intangible stuff. So he spent a lot of his post game presser doing that, being very positive. Which I know some fans probably aren't going to like. They want, they want some sort of autopsy immediately, and you're not going to get that from Coach Heupel. He's, basically when we ask him about why they lost, he goes, both teams, made some mistakes, and we were on the right side of it. It's very cliche. It's very, very boilerplate. I thought Richie Grant was kind of interesting. Richie, we talked to him. And, remember that there was a play there, I don't know, it was the second or third quarter where Richie should have had a pick. And it looked like his momentum carried him too far past the ball. And he said that not only will he not forget that play, but he has never forgotten any play that he didn't make. And he said, I still think about LSU. He thinks about every time. He goes, any mistake I've made in this program since I've been here, I have a vivid memory of it. I think that's really interesting. And I don't know, maybe like worth looking into more and talking to him about it more. Of course, we only have one game left, so whatever. But I think overall, they're obviously disappointed, upset. But I don't know, guys. Like you've probably talked about it a lot. I don't know. I'm not like, oh, they should have had this game. They totally threw it away. They totally blew it. Like, no, I thought some parts of the team played really well. I thought the defense was good again, but they made some mistakes, and it really comes down to the interception that goes through Marlon Williams' hands, no less. It was really weird, but the interception gets turned into points, and that's kind of the game. And UCF didn't get a turnover, so it's pretty simple.
Was that was your big takeaway there from the game there, Andrew? Go ahead. You got a question there for Murph.
Well, I was just going to point out because I know Murph's sitting in his car. Richie Grant did it all. 16 tackles, led the game, had a tackle and a half for loss, 2 pass breakups. I mean, the guy did it all, and it's coming back to the fact that he didn't make that interception really tells a lot about the person.
Mhm.
One of the things that we talked about, Murph, was the fact that there's going to be players that are going to be gone next year. Richie being one of them. He's going to get paid in the NFL easily. How do you feel that the words that he said? Do you feel it's going to rub off on other players and try to lead towards 2021? Because at this point, that's what we're really aiming for is leaning towards 2021.
Well, I think you've seen that certainly from this defense, at most parts of the year, but certainly the last 3 weeks, including tonight, where you've seen young guys, underclassmen, sophomores, juniors, freshmen, some really play well. Tatum Bethune had another good game. He really has a good knack to the ball. He knows how to fight through lanes and avoid blockers. Cam Good pushed the pocket at times. Trayvon Morris-Brash, I think, continues to get better. This is like the third game in a row where I think his performance has increased. Obviously those freshman corners, Corey Thornton and Devontae Brown, they've been tested all year and they've been pretty good. So there are definitely pieces here that you can see filling in for the likes of, Richie and Anthony Montalvo and the seniors who are leaving, because the guys who are playing now really playing because of not only the pandemic and the opt-outs, but playing because of, the 4 guys who were dismissed from the team a few weeks ago, who were, basically all seniors, except for Randy Charlton. Those guys are getting more playing time, and they're proving their worth. It's been good to see what they've done. I mean, it really kind of, you always know the offense is going to be there. I think the offense will always be there for this team because as long as they recruit well, the system leads itself so easily to points. But you need to really see what you've got defensively with this program, and they've got a lot of young guys who I think can lead this team into 2021, 2022, and you feel good about it.
Let's talk about that last sequence in the game, though. Cincinnati, great drive, 4-minute plus drive. Ritter breaks it. They sits down at the 1 yard line, clearly to force the clock. They don't want to give UCF the ball back too quickly. And boy, that started a huge conversation in the booth. I know you didn't watch it because you're at the game. Mark Jones and Dusty Dvorak, who I think is fantastic, talked about the advanced analytics about whether to just go ahead and score or not score. They milk it all the way. And then on that 4th down, Murph, on 4th and goal, I'm praising the move for the record. I thought it was brilliant, except on 4th and goal in the shotgun, terrible snap. UCF came that close to maybe picking it up and scooping it for what would have been a most incredible, insane score, and people would be crushing Fickle on that play. What you were in the? I don't know if you were in the press box.
Yeah.
Take me through that as you're watching that in the press box.
I think I really thought Ritter was going to go in for the touchdown, and because to me it's just so easy. Like, put the game away, go up by 10 points. There's a minute left. There's like 2 minutes left, and you've done a really good job defensively against this offense. They're not going to score 10 points, and go up by 2 scores. And so he goes down at the 1, and I automatically see you and others on Twitter go, "Oh, what a smart play! Oh, it's such a smart play." Yeah, that's because it worked. The problem is, as kind of reared its head there at the end, if you have a bad snap, well, now you're screwed. And, Cincinnati was lucky that their bad snap came with basically no time left. It didn't give UCF a chance to get back in the game, because if they do that on like 2nd down, now UCF has like a minute and a half. And so just score, make it a 2-possession game. Don't leave it a 1-possession game and then leave it up to a bad snap. Just get a touchdown. So look, it worked, but he probably should have scored.
Andrew, what'd you think? What your response to that?
I'm part of the smart play group. I remember that Atlanta-Detroit game where it came back to haunt Atlanta. Cleveland won last week because they didn't run it in the end zone and pissed off a lot of people in Vegas in fantasy football because the spread was 3.5 and they won by 3. I think this was a smart play in the fact of you maintain control of the situation. UCF can score a touchdown in under a minute of game time. They've done it multiple times. So the fact that there was a minute of game time is all a reason not to give them the ball back.
But
now,
you're up by 2 possessions. You'd be up by 2 possessions with less than a minute to go.
It doesn't matter at that point because there's still a possibility of them scoring and then kicking an onside kick with a short field. Now it's not high remote chance of happening, but UCF has the offense that could do it, and we've seen We've seen it before where they can score downfield in a hurry, and in college it's much easier to do than in the pros. They were just trying to be as safe as possible. I personally would have scored on the third down run when there was maybe 30 seconds to go.
And he tried. He did try to score.
Well, and defense, and I think, let me defend the Ritter play. The reason I liked it is, remember, it forced UCF to call their timeouts. So they ran out of timeouts. I agree with you, Andrew. I would have, and I think they did try to score in third down. And you could argue maybe UCF, and that's a weird spot, right? Like if you're UCF at that point, do you try to let him score? Do you not let him score? Maybe at that point it wouldn't have mattered. But I do think they tried to score Murph in that third down, but they got stopped. I think the reason why Ritter didn't score right away was UCF still had timeouts. And I know you said they're up 10, they're playing well, but Andrew's right. I think that tells you how much respect Luke Fickell and that coaching staff have for the UCF offense, that they're worried that up 10 with about a minute 30 and a timeout is not enough.
I mean, but that's wrong. My counter is you're up 10 with a minute 30 with this defense, the way they've played. And by the way, I want to make sure we're very clear on this. We are overinflating something that actually did not mean a whole hell of a lot. The knee there at the 1 yard line, and then the bad snap with no time left. Like UCF was done regardless. They were not going to win that game regardless of the bad snap or not. So I don't know.
If he scoops it up, if the ball is scooped up, we're having a different conversation.
I know. Well, then
it turns into Michigan State, though. I mean, this is UCF Cincinnati. We're it's a lot more conventional.
It turns into Joe Pisarcik. People can look that up.
Very good. Yes.
History around.
There you go. This is a night shift, by the way. As Trace just said, by the way, no offense to Elo and Andrew, but the star Murph has arrived. And I concur. I think you have to agree with that, Andrew. The star's here. I really like your tribute to The Undertaker there, Murph, with your colors there. I think that's why the lights went out at the bounce house, because it's the weekend of The Undertaker's retirement of his 30 years in WWE.
That's totally the wrong color, though.
Why? It's all purple. I have purple. Everything is purple.
Yeah, that's like old school Taker, man. That's old school Taker. I like it. I don't know if that was the design, but nonetheless. Offensively, we're going to go with that story. Offensively, I mentioned earlier, they got held to 4.3 yards of play. I've talked about this on the podcast and on the roundtable. I thought that was a big factor. I was so impressed with Cincinnati tackling. I think they're one of the best tackling defenses I've seen it, not in person this year, unfortunately, but this year, just seeing games around. I thought they didn't give UCF any chippies per se, and I thought that was a big factor in this game. What did you think of that heavyweight match, Cincinnati defense against UCF's offense?
Thought UCF looked great for 2 drives, and it was just so weird how both those drives where they looked really good were the start of the game and their first drive out of halftime. Those 2 drives, I think they run 19 plays. They get 150 yards and score twice. They score 1 other touchdown on all other plays. And I'm interested to go back and look and see what makes that possible. Obviously UCF's offense struggled. But you look at the drops and some of the penalties, I don't know. I feel like they only ended up with 350 yards of offense. It's not that much. Second game in a row where they're under their season average. But I didn't feel like this defense suffocated them. They had a lot of chances, and they just couldn't capitalize. I mean,
couldn't run the ball on them. Couldn't run on them. Average only about 3 yards of carry.
Absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely not. But I thought Dylan played pretty well. I mean, even the interception is not even on Dylan Gabriel. So you just there are. I keep coming back to the drops, and they're not entertaining to talk about because it's like. It's hard to get, maniacal about, that dropping of football. Both teams had a lot of drops. I mean, Cincinnati dropped an early touchdown in the first quarter. But that really is a big part of this game. The missed 4th down by Marlon on a drop, and then Marlon has the interception go right through his hands. It's a big part of this game. But I thought overall that UCF's offense comported themselves fairly well against this defense. And so it was a tight battle on both sides.
They did about as well as they could have when you think about it. You're right. Their first drive to open the game and the first drive in the second half were their best 2 of the game. And then the last drive, the last offensive drive they had was basically their third best one, where they needed a pass interference penalty to bail them out, but it's ultimately led to a touchdown. But you're absolutely right. I don't view this as a bad game by Dylan Gabriel at all. In fact, I can say that neither Eric nor I, really hampered on that. But we did talk about some of the unnecessary drops that really carried over from last week. I don't know. Did someone put like something in their food or
let me ask you both this though. How much of that you got to give credit to the secondary of Cincinnati being physical with those receivers and not making it easy on the receivers? You're not getting a clear path to your route. You're going to get bumped. You're going to get nagged a little bit. And as a receiver, when you're seeing a defender, if you're thinking about a defender, where is he? Is he close to me? That's going to mess with your concentration and maybe have some drops there. I think Cincinnati's secondary had something to do with that as well. Let's give them a little bit of a credit on some of those.
Sure. I think Kobe Bryant had a really good day for the Owls. He was very aggressive out at corner. And obviously they have a very good secondary, but the drops that UCF had, like some of the guys were wide open and it's just rare. Like, and it is weird. Something you brought up, Elo, about it's a continuation from last week. I think Marlon Williams had 2 drops last week too. It's just awkward for one of the best receivers in college football, who outside of that had a nice game.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna give him a pass. I mean, the kid was unbelievable. That drive in the third quarter where he scored the touchdown he was a man. I mean, that guy, that stock is going up. I didn't think anybody's stock could go higher than Gabe Davis did with his performance last year. But Marlon, man, he is showing everything.
He's tough on all levels of the field, obviously over the middle, but he can go down the seam too. And then he's an absolute bull to try to bring down. It's really difficult to tackle him.
Let me ask you quick, Andrew, and then I'll let you chime in. Fourth quarter, the TV mentioned this. They didn't see a lot of Marlon in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that? Was there any talk about that afterwards?
No, I actually, it was funny. I was looking on the sidelines for Otis Anderson, who I didn't see a ton of late in that game. I really wasn't looking for Marlon, but Marlon, when I do remember Marlon being on the sidelines, he had his helmet on, so maybe he missed some plays. And remember, he got banged up early on in the game, in the third quarter, I think. But no, I don't think there was anything where it's like, oh, he's really hurt or there's something wrong here. We'll see.
One thing I noticed early in the season is the usage of Marlon Williams as a blocking back. Mm-hmm. We saw it on a few package plays and ended up being really successful. And we haven't seen that since. I'm wondering, is he just getting a little too, dinged up? Because he worked great as a blocker. I mean, that guy, definitely goes by the thought of no block, no rock. But do you guys remember that earlier in the year when they had Williams in the backfield and he would be the lead back out of the gun and just opened up the sideline? You guys remember that?
A few times, yeah. I mean, I remember it being like a huge staple, but I do remember him doing it.
And then nothing. I always wanted that to come back. But the other thing is the other player that was missing through most of the game, Murph, was Greg McCray, and he was basically irrelevant throughout the game. Did you see anything after those first couple possessions before he came back later?
No, I really didn't, and we didn't get. It's hard to say if anybody was at 100% in the run game because none of them did exceptionally well. So maybe they were all dinged up. But I don't think Greg is. Greg is obviously fighting through some of the typical like late season nicks and bruises and stuff, but nothing like debilitating. And to be fair, he was actually one of the 2 players we talked to after the game, so they wouldn't put him up there if he was actually really hurt. So I did see him on there late. He was either on there on the last play of the game or the last play of their last full offensive drive. He was in there, but yeah, I think it's just a guy who needs some time off. Don't we all? Like, it's a long season and guys get banged up. I think that's all it is.
Our old buddy Jeffrey's chiming in. He might not have a voice left from his PA. You can comment on that if you want, Murph, on that. But good stat here. Second half, Cincinnati had the ball for 23 minutes. UCF had the ball for 7 minutes. I mean, and what's so fascinating about this game was, though, it tells you how good Cincinnati was, because I thought the first half, the game was kind of on UCF's pace a little bit, especially in the first quarter.
Yeah.
But and we've talked about this on this post game about how UCF really forced Cincinnati to throw the ball early. They held Cincinnati to 7 yards rushing in the first half. But Desmond Ridder, Murph, 202 yards in the first half, making plays with his arm. That was the big question. Can he make plays with his arm from behind? And he did. I was so impressed with him. And then the second half, I thought the game was played on Cincinnati's terms with pace, the physicality at the trenches. And I keep saying this, and it's not to be a negative, but we could talk about all the fancy plays and how many plays you run, and it's no huddle, and it's all this offense. But football is still won in the trenches. And I thought Cincinnati, especially there, just got the yards they needed at the trenches. They protected Ridder. They ran the football very well in the second half. And Desmond Ridder, with his legs, made some big plays in those last couple of possessions, especially that last first down before the controversial first down, the one where UCF, I thought, had good containment. He scored it away and got that first down, which started to force UCF to use their timeouts. I thought he was incredible.
Yeah, well, really, Cincinnati, I think, set the tone with the way they came out of the locker room at halftime. With that 8.5-minute drive, it was the second longest drive in terms of time that Cincinnati's had this season. And a lot of it was just runs up the gut. And they would get like 3 or 4 or 5, and then they'd pop one for 15. And you saw that sort of accumulate as the game went down. That's definitely what happened there on the last Cincinnati drive. Is I think after a while you did see UCF's front just sort of get worn down. And then you saw like more big plays because that defense had kind of been pounded at for the entire game. And, it didn't work early on. I think I thought the defense overall was pretty good. But in that second half, they set that tone with that long drive, and it paid off in the long run, because that sort of thing, even though I think they held them to a field goal on that drive, and then UCF came back and actually scored a touchdown on their ensuing drive, that kind of work, it pays dividends later on in the game. And I think you saw that late when really Cincinnati and Ridder, like you said, was really gashing them.
I think he's the player of the year. I know I don't know if we did discuss that on the podcast. I thought, based on this game, could decide the player of the year. I think Desmond Ridder is right now your American Conference player of the year.
Yeah. Hard. I mean, after seeing him like that, yeah, hard to really disagree too much on that. You're right. I mean, and again, as long as he's winning, he's going to have an edge, and they're winning.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I know we're headed for a Cincinnati-Tulsa conference championship game, barring some wacky stuff happening. You've got to see them in person, both teams in person. In your opinion, who's the better team?
Cincinnati. Definitely Cincinnati. I think their defense actually, their defense is more advantageous. It's more attacking. It's a little more aggressive, and their defense actually, I think, is better at all three levels. Obviously, Tulsa has some great linebackers, but Cincinnati's defense at all three levels is really good. And then offensively, they don't wow you, but they know what they do well, and they stick to it. And so, it allows them to not get behind in games because their defense is so strong, and they control the clock. That because they're not behind a lot, it allows them to run their offense, which is just a lot of like old style, punch you in the mouth kind of ball. And usually it is wipe teams out, and it didn't wipe out UCF, but you saw late in this game how it is just so effective. After you punch after punch after punch, it really just wears you down. And so I think that they are more. There's more quality on their offense, even though it's not fancy. There's more quality there because of their backs and Ridder, and then their defense I think is more talented throughout.
I agree.
I agree too. It's basically old school Big Ten football. Smash you in the face kind of thing. I totally agree with Murph on that one. Cincinnati's a better team. They don't have a Zaven Collins, but who does besides Tulsa? I mean, that guy is magical. But top to bottom, Cincinnati is the more talented team. Hasn't required any divine intervention to win a game. Which I think we need to take into consideration. It's not, Tulsa's case is they're good, but in this case, it's also sometimes better to be lucky than good. Cincinnati's just good. The UCF game was the only time all year that they've been challenged. They've basically, wiped the floor with everyone else.
Yep.
They were pushed hard, but they were the better team and prevailed. But they're way better than Tulsa.
And plus, what's Tulsa's quarterback situation? I have no idea right now.
May not matter. The way they're winning games, though, does it matter? They'll just, grab a guy from the stands and he'll throw a couple touchdowns on fourth.
Against Tulane, but not against Cincinnati.
No. I tend to agree, and I think Cincinnati's a great shape. All right, last question for both of you, because I know it's been a long night. Murph's got to go out and do his do whatever Murph does at late Saturday night.
He's dressed for the scene.
He's the scene there. Let me ask you both. So where do we go from here now? UCF plays South Florida. You mentioned that earlier. It's a short week. As of now, that's scheduled. I know South Florida's had some COVID issues, but let's put that to a side, guys. What's next now for this team? We're not going to get into what does this mean big picture. We got podcasts to do that down the road. But as far as how does this team recover from this and play South Florida in a short week here? In Tampa, I know South Florida is not very good. It's a rivalry game. Can this team put this behind him quickly enough and show up in Tampa and finish on a good note?
Yeah, Josh Heupel was asked after the game, kind of basically, what does this team have left to play for? Because you're not going to win the you're not going to win the conference. So how do you get your guys motivated? And he goes, hey, we got a trophy game next week, which he meant obviously the War on I-4 trophy. So I guess that's where they're going to use for motivation is, hey, we're going to go down there. It's a rivalry game, and we want to win that trophy again. So but that is, to your point, that is about it. And wanting to finish the season strong and end on a good note. I get all that, but yeah, I think they all know it's not the season that they wanted. It's going to end up being another year in which they don't win the conference title, and that is always the goal now for this program. So without that, it's in some aspects it's going to be a failure, but with the week ahead, they're just going to be like, look, we've got one game left. It's a rivalry game, and we want to win this trophy, and let's go do it.
That's all they could say. That's all they could say, right, Andrew? That's all you got to do.
Oh, I totally agree. The truth is, it's a rivalry game. You got to take that seriously. They're coming in this game with the opportunity to tie the series between South Florida and UCF. They haven't lost against them since 2016. So you have an opportunity for a 4-game winning streak. You go for it. There's a trophy on the line, and we talked about this very briefly. Based on Heupel's quote, when you have hardware on the line in a game, obviously that game is important enough to have hardware, UConn notwithstanding. It matters enough. And in this case, it's the War on 4. It's those neighbors to the west that people often don't like to speak of. That kind of good old fashioned hate is part what makes college sports so magical. So you don't want to let that down, and you want to end the season on a good note. You want momentum going into 2021. Regardless of if there's a bowl game or not, you want positive vibes going through the program. This has been a rough year for everyone, and the last thing you want to do is end it on a sour note.
Yeah,
I agree. And remember, 2-3 months ago, we were just wondering if we get any football. So let's not. Yeah. Hey, let's get as much football as you can before you never know. Nothing's for taking. Don't take it for granted, right? So
exactly.
All right, that'll do it. Murph, tell the audience where they can find you, what you got working on. We got a busy week. It's even though the holidays are coming up, we got basketball starting here, and you still Tampa, probably USF game. It's gonna be a busy week. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, it's gonna be weird, right? I think we're gonna obviously be talking to football during the week, but I think we're also gonna have an interview with Johnny Dawkins. I think on Tuesday, I hear. So we'll be talking to him as well, lead up to their season, and then obviously come the holiday, we'll head down to Tampa, and then we'll head back up here and watch basketball open against Oklahoma. So it should be fun. But definitely busy, which is not a bad thing. I just wanted to restate the point that you just made, Eric. I think it's a great point that people should never lose sight of. That even though tonight's loss, sucked and people are upset and whatever, and that's fine because as fans, you had those emotions, but at least look back on it and be grateful that this season right now, knock on wood, is playing out, and you might get a full 9 games in here, and some teams are not going to get that, and so. Hopefully they get to play against USF. We'll see if they play a bowl game, and just be grateful once it's all over, even if they're like whatever their record is, just be grateful that you had football.
Yep. And Andrew, I know you got your knee-jerk reactions, which you're going to work on. That'll be up on the site, blackandgoldbanneret.com, as it always, alongside this episode. And we got our bowl projections. We'll see how much difference the bowl projections will look like as a result of tonight. Maybe not too many changes, perhaps. But we won't spoil it.
I mean, it hurts in the fact that so many games keep getting postponed or canceled. It really throws a monkey wrench into how the bowls change. But I mean, the truth is, it's probably going to be very regional. I know UCF fans don't want to hear that. I would not be surprised at all if they stay in state. We both have been kind of in the same boat on that one. But that affects a lot of schools. And say what you want about the Americans Bowl contracts. I mean, you play to win the game. You go with wherever you go, and let's just hope there's a game at all.
Exactly. So that's what we'll do. All right, guys, this was fun. Thanks to everybody that's tuned in. Make sure you check out blackandgoldbanneret.com. As you see on your screen right there, we're going to have a good recap, knee-jerk reactions from Andrew. We're going to have a lot of coverage this upcoming week. Women's basketball starts Wednesday against Virginia. Men's basketball starts against Oklahoma on Saturday, part of an incredible 6-game gauntlet to start the year for the men's team, which on this YouTube page, me and Murph broke down, so you can check that out. We are still mesmerized over that schedule, Murph, which we'll get into as well on this podcast coming up this week. Black and Gold Banner. We'll probably be, that podcast will air Wednesday. Will come out Wednesday. We'll recap this game, look ahead to the big War on I-4 game, as well as the basketball season starting. So this is the place where you guys can come. We'll have a lot of videos. We'll have videos like this after the USF game and basketball games as well this season. So make sure you follow us on blackandgoldbanneret.com, as well as right there on Twitter, UCF_Banneret. And we are on Facebook as well, right there. Facebook / Black and Gold Banneret. For Brian Murphy, for Andrew Gluchov, I'm Eric Lopez. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to this edition of Night Shift.